most conflicts in the international system derives from security competition, as one side increases its security at the expense of the other. So I would agree that NATO could be considered to be a stabilizing force during the Cold War because it was status quo power. But after the Cold War, it's become revisionist. It's no longer a defensive alliance. It attacks others, and it's an expansionist. And part of the reason behind this is because it assumed a hegemonic role. It wanted to be the only dominant force in Europe. Now, the problem here was that when the Cold War finally came to an end, there was a real possibility to replace the confrontational bloc-based system with an inclusive security arrangement. And we were largely on the path to this. Again, in 1990, we agreed on this Charter of Paris for a new Europe, which was supposed to have indivisible security and remove the dividing lines in Europe. And in 1994, we developed the OSCE, an inclusive security institutions, which was based on the same principles. However, NATO expansion effectively cancelled this completely by then also reviving bloc politics in Europe. Because instead of removing the dividing lines, we have been moving them gradually to the east. And instead of pursuing indivisible security, which we had committed to in this pan-European security agreements, we see that NATO began to expand its security at the expense of Russia. And this has been the key problem. And this was always going to end in conflict because NATO's recipe for a stable Europe has effectively been that all countries on the continent should be included in the same security architecture, except the largest state in Europe, which is Russia. So what happens if you exclude the country with the largest territory, the largest population, largest army, and also now the largest economy? Well, of course, you're going to recreate the dynamic of the Cold War. And this idea that Russia's always been bent on expansion again, I think it's worth paraphrasing George Kennan. He was the main architect behind the Cold War security, the containment strategy against the Soviet Union. And in 1998, he was interviewed and he warned fiercely against NATO expansion. And he said, this will have to trigger at some point a Russian reaction. And he warned as well, when Russia reacts, the NATO expansionist will say, well, this is just the way the Russians are. This is why we expanded NATO. And he said very clearly this was all wrong, that NATO expansion had been a huge betrayal of the post-Cold War peace, which unavoidably would restore a conflict with Russia.